It's July 13th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with the Yoon Kishida sit-down in Vilnius. President Yoon has requested Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida to get Korean experts involved in monitoring the Fukushima wastewater release. Kishida says he'll make sure the discharge does no harm to the health of the South Korean public. North Korea confirms that it test-fired a Hwasong-18 solid-fuel intercontinental ballistic missile on Wednesday. The regime's leader Kim Jong-un warns of more military actions until the U.S. drops its aggressive policies against the North. And over in the U.S., inflation once again cooled in June, with prices up 3% from a year ago, the smallest rise since March 2021. President Yoon begins his first-day visit to Europe in Warsaw, looking to broaden Seoul's engagement with the continent. Yoon on Wednesday met with South Korean expats in the Polish capital and emphasized the two countries' strategic partnership based on their growing economic relations. Now, traveling with a delegation of 89 corporate leaders, the South Korean leader's visit is expected to focus on expanding economic cooperation in high-tech technologies, as well as in the construction sector as a part of efforts to rebuild Ukraine. Yoon on Thursday will meet with the Polish President Andrzej Duda for a bilateral summit, followed by separate talks with the Prime Minister and both parliamentary speakers. And before heading to Poland, President Yoon held talks with Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida on various topics of mutual interest, including concerns over the Fukushima wastewater release plan. Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
Sitting down with his Japanese counterpart Fumio Kishida on the sidelines of the NATO summit on Wednesday, President Yoon made three requests to further ensure the safety of South Koreans ahead of the planned release of Fukushima nuclear power plant wastewater. The first, that Japan share the release's monitoring results in real time with South Korea. The second, the South Korean experts be part of the monitoring team. And finally, that Japan halts the release process if the concentration of radioactive materials surpasses standards. Yoon also said he respects the IAEA's recent report that the release plan meets international standards, but re-emphasized that the health and safety of South Koreans are the utmost priority. According to the top office, Kishida said there won't be any release that threatens the health of people in South Korea or Japan and promised transparency and real-time communications. However, the Japanese government didn't make a clear announcement on whether South Korea's request to be part of the monitoring team will be accepted. Despite the sensitive issue, the two leaders embraced their newly improved relationship. The two last met just a month and a half ago, and both said the resumption of more direct diplomacy is bearing fruit.
함께 노력한 결과 한일 양국 관계는 개선과 발전의 방향으로 지금 움직이고 있습니다. 저는 한일 양국이 협력하여 영내 평화와 번영, 글로벌 현안 해결에 크게 기여할 수 있다고 믿습니다.
As President Yoon and I have opened a new era for the two countries, there has been progress in various different types of cooperation in both government and private sectors.
According to the top office, the leaders also spoke about economic exchanges, which have resumed since the normalization of the relationship, with Japan relisting South Korea on its whitelist for trade. The two promised more official channels to further foster bilateral trade. In the meantime, they also used the opportunity to condemn North Korea's missile provocation from earlier in the day and promised to cooperate further on that issue. They also mentioned the three-way cooperation with the U.S. and pledged to continue working closely for security in the region. In fact, such a meeting is in the pipeline in the next month or two, with a Seoul, Washington, Tokyo trilateral summit already agreed. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
Now, let's take a closer look at President Yoon request to Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida over the Fukushima wastewater release with Professor Kim Mi-kyung this morning. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Professor Kim, President Yoon asked Kishida to include South Korean experts in monitoring the planned release of the wastewater. Now, the question is, how will the inclusion of South Korean experts be so helpful?
I don't think that is going to happen. Let me tell you why. One noteworthy interaction between the two leaders is that Japanese Prime Minister Kishida evaded to respond to President Yoon's proposal to include Korean experts in the monitoring team during the bilateral summit meeting. We can guess the Seoul government will exercise its share of influence in picking and choosing who will be included in the expert team. As you know, the Yoon administration has been supportive of Japan's plan to release the treated contaminated water. Yet, Kishida's evasive reaction seems to reflect Japan's concern that the matter of affairs can change once Yoon is out of power. Therefore, from Japan's point of view, it is better not to let any Korean experts in the group, given the possibility of regime change in Seoul. Japan would not want to play a different ballgame with a different partner. Yoon's reign will be over in 4 years, but the contaminated water release will take place over 3 decades.
Then, in the meantime, Kishida replied that he'll do everything possible to secure the safety of the release and not discharge any water that could harm the health or the safety of the South Korean people, and including those people in Japan as well. But what's your take on this?
What else can he say other than that? What he has said is about principles and normative workings that Japanese government has to engage in when it comes down to the release of contaminated waters. The decision has been made with the strong support of IAEA, but there are dissenting voices coming from various groups in both countries. People are feeling wary. In order to calm them down, the Japanese government has to send out those assuring and reassuring messages. That's what's happening. If anything goes wrong, Tokyo will have an excuse saying that they did not know at that time. Let us keep our fingers crossed that nothing disastrous is going to happen.
Sure. Securing health and safety of Korean people and Japanese people is the principle, like you said, and has to be the core of the release if it actually happens. Now, that plan appears to be very imminent, right, as early as next month. What do you think needs to be prepared, secured, or even ensured in the next few weeks or for the coming years?
Transparency. Transparency. I cannot emphasize it more. Real-time and open release of relevant information. Japan has a tendency of keeping controversial information just to themselves, and some people justify it as a manifestation of shame culture. But when it comes down to safety and health hazard, forget about those abstract concepts. What matters is people's livelihood. Transparency will allow the positive workings of collective wisdom.
Sure, keeping transparency in the entire process that will take 3 decades. Now, the two sides, Yoon and Kishida, also agreed to further tighten their cooperation against North Korea's nuclear and missile programs and provocations. Can we now say more direct diplomacy between the two leaders is fully back on track? I mean, how do you think Seoul-Tokyo ties will look from now on?
It does seem like the shuttle diplomacy is back on track. How lucky Mr. Kishida is to have Mr. Yoon as his staunch ally in Seoul. The two countries will remain, I think, cordial for a few coming years. The two leaders do seem to get along very well, and they do seem to have mutual understanding of the important and pressing issues in the region.
Sure, things between the two countries have been smoother if we have to compare with what we've gone through for the past years of, historical disputes and diplomatic struggles and conflicts. So it is better now, right?
It does seem like that. And, and what's going to unfold in the future? Let's keep our eyes peeled.
Sure.
and see how the two countries get along with each other.
Indeed. Professor Kim Mi-kyung, thank you so much for joining us all the way from Busan this morning.
Thank you.
And President Yoon Suk-yeol continued to live up to his moniker of #1 salesman as he worked to strengthen supply chains of advanced tech industries and expand into new markets during the NATO summit. Lee Soo-jin reports.
South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol continues to pursue sales diplomacy. He attended 13 bilateral meetings during the NATO summit in Lithuania in an effort to strengthen the supply chain for key high-tech industries such as semiconductors and to expand into new markets.
This NATO summit had the largest number of bilateral talks with 13. Notably, 8 of them were the first bilateral meeting since the inauguration of President Yoon, and it is expected to be a starting point for creating new achievements in the future.
Yoon's meeting with Lithuania's President Nausėda on Wednesday was significant in terms of securing supply chains in the advanced tech industry, especially as the nation is a global leader in laser tech that's essential for ultra-precision and ultra-micro processing of semiconductors. During the summit, both Yoon and Nausėda said they hope to expand cooperation between companies of both respective countries in the advanced tech sector. The Lithuanian president also expressed interest in South Korea's advanced weapons systems such as self-propelled artillery. President Yoon also met with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands on Tuesday to strongly encourage Dutch semiconductor equipment company ASML to invest in Korea. ASML is the maker of the world's top DUV lithography systems and is known to be currently considering building a DUV manufacturing plant in Asia. Yoon promised incentives such as financial support and tax deductions. As for expanding into new markets, South Korea is mainly trying to boost exports of nuclear power plants, arms, and infrastructure.
President Yoon explained the advantages of Korean-made nuclear power plants to the heads of the Netherlands, Hungary, Romania and Sweden, all nations that have plans to build new nuclear power plants, and also offered cooperation on the nuclear front.
The top office also said that it would put in its best efforts to work with relevant ministries and companies to systematically follow up with the agenda items discussed during the summit to produce meaningful results. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
And the South Korean leader also prioritized North Korea issues at NATO, vowing to secure a tighter collective security against the regime's provocations. Our top office correspondent Oh Soo-young has more from Vilnius.
President Yoon Suk-yeol has called for stronger condemnation and response to North Korea's nuclear and missile provocations as he addressed world leaders at a meeting of NATO countries in Lithuania extended to invited nations. Noting that North Korea's missiles reach could extend beyond its neighboring countries to cities like London, Paris and Berlin, Yoon on Wednesday warned that Pyongyang's actions threaten global peace and security. On that note, the South Korean leader expressed appreciation for NATO's condemnation of Pyongyang's nuclear weapons program in a joint communiqué released the previous day, which also calls for North Korea's complete, verifiable and irreversible denuclearization. NATO's statement in 2022 did not include North Korea, and the alliance has not issued a joint condemnation of the regime's nuclear and missile program since 2018. During his speech, Yoon also renewed Seoul's support for Ukraine, currently provided in the form of humanitarian aid and non-lethal weapons. The president emphatically promised that he and South Koreans will stand with Ukrainians until the day when their freedom is fully restored, and pledged to contribute to the NATO-Ukraine trust funds towards building Kyiv's resilience. Furthermore, reflecting on Seoul's new bilateral partnership program with NATO adopted Tuesday, covering 11 areas of cooperation, Yoon highlighted cyber cooperation and expanding military intel sharing as vital areas going forward, with South Korea to establish an international cyber training center. A senior presidential official told reporters Seoul is also expected to work closely with NATO on the organization's system that collects and utilizes military intelligence among member countries. Increasing its participation in information exchanges could provide insights for Seoul on sharing nuclear-related intelligence with the United States, as the two allies create and operate a nuclear consultation group to counter North Korea's growing belligerence. On that note, President Yoon stressed that the growing use of digital media and cyberspace are being leveraged by authoritarian forces, whose unhesitant use of war violence and manipulation of public opinion challenge international norms. He called for nations with common universal values to cooperate more firmly in solidarity, saying Indo-Pacific and Atlantic security issues cannot be separated. On that note, Yoon on Wednesday moderated the second meeting of NATO's 4 Asia-Pacific partners, Japan, Australia and New Zealand. Yoon's office says the AP4 leaders agreed to work more closely with NATO and Pacific Island countries, as well as bolster cooperation on supply chain diversity and resilience and cybersecurity. 오수영, Arirang News, Vilnius.
And just hours ago, North Korea confirmed that it test-fired its Hwasong-18 solid-fuel ICBM on Wednesday, with the operation being guided by leader Kim Jong-un. According to North State-run media, the missile flew 1,001 kilometers for 4,491 seconds at an altitude of 6,648 kilometers before splashing into the East Sea. The report says the regime conducted the missile test to confirm the capability and reliability of a new strategic weapon system. It added that Kim vowed to take military offensive action until the U.S. abandons its hostile policy against the regime. U.S. Consumer Price Index slowed faster than expected in the month of June. Now, expectations are high that the Federal Reserve may make its final rate hike in July. Our Lee Seung-ja has more.
As the U.S. Consumer Price Index slowed faster than expected in June, expectations are growing that the end is near for U.S. Federal Reserve interest rate hikes. According to U.S. Department of Labor on Wednesday, June CPI rose 3.0% from the same month last year, slightly below the market forecast of 3.1%. The latest figures show that the country's inflation had shrank by a third since the June 2022 CPI showed a 9.1% rise compared to the same month the previous year. The June core CPI, which excludes volatile food and energy prices, rose 4.8% from a year ago, but was again below the market consensus of 5%. While some believe that the faster-than-expected slowdown in the country's inflation means that the U.S. Central Bank will impose a final hike in July instead of the 2 more rate hikes this year that policymakers had previously hinted, others are more cautious. They say that because core CPI is still in the 4% range, which is twice the U.S. Fed's target of 2%, the central bank could go ahead with 2 more rate hikes this year. Still, investors seem to be optimistic over the latest CPI figures as U.S. stocks and treasuries rallied while the U.S. dollar tumbled. Wall Street's benchmark S&P 500 stock index on Wednesday closed 0.7% higher, marking its highest level since April 2022, while the tech-heavy Nasdaq rose 1.2% on the day. Traders expect the U.S. Fed to pause its rate hike after a 25 basis point rate hike in July, putting the country's key interest rate in the 5.25 to 5.5% range. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Matthew Ashley, and we now turn over to stories from around the world. We begin in Italy, where at least 1 person has died amid soaring temperatures. The rising mercury is part of a heat wave named Cerberus after the mythological 3-headed dog. High temperatures are expected to continue for 2 weeks, and a new heat wave called Charon is set to replace Cerberus on Friday. The heat waves are threatening to top Italy's previous high of 48.8 degrees Celsius, set in August 2021 in Sicily. Other countries, including Spain, France and Greece, could see temperatures surpass 40 degrees. Several tourists in Italy have collapsed from the heat, and people are being urged to stay hydrated and to avoid drinking caffeine or alcohol. Now, the European Union has passed a law aimed at restoring damaged ecosystems. The nature restoration law was passed in the EU Parliament in Brussels on Wednesday, with 336 votes in favour and 300 against. It means that countries in the bloc will need to restore 20% of the EU's natural land and sea ecosystems by 2030. It comes as Europe has seen a decline in its natural habitats, 81% of which have been determined to be in poor condition. The law was fiercely opposed by right-wing parties who say that it would harm farmers and risk food security. The bill's text will now be negotiated before a final agreement is reached. Now, in more good news for nature, Colombia says that deforestation across the country fell 29% in 2022 compared to the previous year, while deforestation of its part of the Amazon rainforest dropped by 26%. Announced by the Colombian government on Wednesday, it's the lowest level of deforestation since 2013. Just over 1,200 square kilometers of forest was cut down, roughly 220,000 football fields. It's down from the 2021 total deforestation figure of 1,700 square kilometers. The drop was credited to paying local communities to protect forests and to criminal investigations launched against anyone suspected of financing deforestation. And finally, the 75th Primetime Emmy Awards announced its list of nominations on Wednesday. The drama Succession led the pack with 27 nominations, including those for Best Drama, Lead Actress, and even 3 of its cast tipped for Lead Actor. Not far behind was the video game adaptation Last of Us at 24 nominations. It was followed by Season 2 of White Lotus with 23 nominations. The awards show is considered the TV equivalent to the Oscars and honors the best in American primetime television over the past year. The winners will be announced on September 19th.
Good morning. We need to brace for massive monsoon rainfall. Starting this afternoon, central regions will receive 30 to 80 millimeters an hour of very heavy rain. Then the south will get heavy showers tomorrow. Right now, rain is pounding down in Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces. So rain advisory has been issued in parts of those provinces, but the advisory could be expanded to the whole country with preliminary rain advisory issued except on Jeju, where heat warnings are being placed. The capital area could see up to 250 millimeters of showers into tomorrow. The rest of the country could see more than 200 millimeters. For now, we are looking at downpours in the capital around mid-afternoon and after midnight. Temperatures will not rise that much today, with most parts seeing figures in the mid to upper 20s this afternoon. And please stay safe today. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. Stay safe wherever you are.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, look my way. Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포토스팟. 휴대폰 한 대로 감당할 수 있겠니?
Arrow straight through my heart.
웰컴. 엄청난 에너지를 춤으로 뿜어내는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
Hello, I'm Ernei Müller, Ambassador of Slovenia to the Republic of Korea. Right now, I see Korea shining in the world. Korea has many strengths and the global presence is already here. Slovenia will continue to establish the presence in the international scene. This is also one of the reasons why we opened the embassy in Korea last year. I always thank Arirang TV for playing a big role in promoting Korean information to the world so that many people can access Korean content and get to know all aspects of Korean culture. I hope that people around the world will continue to communicate and sympathize with Korea. Resonating the world, Arirang.
한국에 오면 먹어야죠. 먹어도 끝이 없는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니? 웰컴. (24시간) 불이 꺼지지 않는 나라. 감당할 수 있겠니?
insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation. Making news just for you. It's July 13th here in Seoul. I'm Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kishida.
Good morning, Yoon.
Good morning, and Niall Song. Hi, everyone. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, let's start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending on social media over the past 24 hours. We've been seeing a lot of rain hit Korea this week. Weather officials said downpours left one person dead and one person missing. Subway trains temporarily stopped operating, and some roads and bridges were closed off. Just like last summer, some apartment complexes and houses were flooded. And for the next few days, the KMA says we'll see up to 150 millimeters of rain fall across the country. Moving on, from July 20th, Starbucks Korea will provide some of its beverages in the Trenta size. This is almost a liter, which is the biggest size Starbucks offers, only in the North American region. Starbucks will be releasing this limited size edition for 3 of its popular beverages to commemorate its 24th anniversary of opening here in South Korea. And starting next month, you will have to pay a little extra to ride the subway and bus here in Korea. Seoul City has decided to raise subway fares by 12%, bringing the total to around $1.1. Bus fares were raised by 25% to $1.2. Now, if we take a closer look at the last news story, it was the first time in 8 years that officials raised public transit fees, and this was decided upon during a closed-door meeting on Wednesday. Talks of price hikes have been going on for a while, especially since Seoul's subway system suffered annual losses of $721 million on average from 2018 to 2022. This comes with inflation and an aging population. Senior citizens aged 65 and up can ride the subway and bus for free. And it's not just Seoul. Busan, Korea's second most populous city, is also trying to raise public transit fares, as well as Ulsan City. Now, I would like to bring the news feed here to the studio. Now, I know you ride the subway and bus to work. So once you heard this story, did this affect you in any way?
Yes, it did. It absolutely did.
How?
And yes, I understand that it's not a huge raise just by the subway itself, but adding that to, the living cost that's been raised recently.
Any raise.
Yeah, and then even
taxis.
Taxis have gone up. So I think for a 5-minute taxi ride, it was all the way up to 6,000 Korean won, which is like $5. I understand that's not, compared to the rest of the world, it's not that bad. But for somebody who is living here, who's only known that cost, all of that piling up is not fun.
It's not fun. And as we mentioned yesterday, we're also seeing water prices go up. Living costs are just soaring so high.
Exactly.
And so quickly.
It's all relative as well. So even though we might have had cheap subway prices, which I'll talk about in a second, if it increases just any bit, it will still impact us.
And why don't you mention that? We do have one of the cheapest public transit fares in the world.
For sure. I mean, subway in Korea, as you mentioned, went up from 12,051 to 1,401. Sorry, 1,250 to 1,400, which is around $1.2, which is still quite cheap. Bus from 1,201 to 1,501, which is also around $1.2, $1.3. So compared to other countries with similar economic conditions, Korea's public transport is on the very cheap side.
Right.
For example, Japan is around $1.5, UK at $3.24, and the US at around $2.5. So in fact, Korea's public transport ranks with Brazil, Jamaica, Costa Rica, as well as Thailand in terms of pricing. So you can see that considering the previous deficit, the price increase seems like quite an adequate measure for Korea's economic standards and the cost of living that is priced for Seoul and the other cities in Korea. So I mean, although as you mentioned, any increase will impact us in a sense.
Right.
But I think it makes sense, especially considering the 721.
I think that's
$1
the general annoyance.
Annually.
Yeah, the general annoyance of everything going up, but then, our pay should also start going up accordingly. I think that's what it is.
I think that's a central issue.
That's what it is.
Sure. Everyone's saying living costs are so high, but my salary isn't going up.
the same.
That's not fair. But that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's now move on to our discussion topic. Today, we're going to be talking about how young adults in Korea have been trying to update their national ID cards. To find out what this is all about, take a look at the screen. It's definitely me, but a prettier version of me, all thanks to AI. Smartphone camera apps have released AI profile photo services that compile 10 to 20 selfies and then produce high-quality studio-like profile photos. Since the launch of one such service, over 700,000 users have tried it out. Some have even tried to change the picture on their national ID card to these ones. But the government has decided to prohibit the use of such transformed images. Today, NewsGen aims to look into why our generation seems to be so fixated on Photoshop or filters by answering 3 questions. 1, why is this AI profile picture trend booming in Korea? 2, why is our generation so used to using Photoshop and filters? 3, is there any psychological attachment to this? AI profile pictures are massively popular among the younger generation here in Korea. And now, why don't you start us off by telling what exactly this is?
So this is a filter app, and you can pay money. It's about, I guess, $5
Right.
and you take 20 of your own pictures, put it in, and like you mentioned in the VCR, it turns you into this beautiful, photoshopped, photo shoot, professionally done kind of.
Is that you?
Oh, there
That
we
is
go.
a version of me in
That's
another
exactly
universe.
like you.
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. It's beautiful, but I don't feel that that's actually me.
Why? Why not?
I don't know. They've taken my eyes and put it into what I think Koreans would consider a conventional beauty standard. The shape of the face, the nose and the mouth, and even the shoulder was a lot narrower and skinnier. So I don't feel that that's me.
But that's based on like 20 or 50 selfies of yours, right?
Right. So I think from those pictures, they've only taken my eyes. They're like, the eyes are worth using.
Those can stay.
Yeah, those can stay. Everything else goes.
And I think even those who might not have tried it out themselves have still either seen or heard about this, especially since a lot of people have uploaded their own AI profile pictures on social media or even tried using them for their national ID card.
Yeah.
But the latter scenario has stirred quite the controversy, right, Xiong?
It really has. I mean, as the application became hugely popular, the Ministry of Interior and Safety announced on the 27th of June that these AI-generated or enhanced profile pictures cannot be used for official documents such as national ID cards. The ministry is also in discussion with the leading application provider, Snow Corporation, to insert a warning phrase that the contents of the AI profile service cannot be used for official documents. Local authorities have already been using a face recognition software that when receiving new applications for resident ID cards, it compares your new profile photo with the previously registered one to check similarities and confirm identity. So whilst there are leeways to get a more complimentary photo of you registered, it may not work.
It may not work. And what did you guys think about banning AI profile photos being used on national ID cards?
I mean, if it looks so similar to what you look like in real life, go for it. And like he was saying, the face recognition program will pretty much insult you and say, nope, that's not you. That's not the real you. But, if not, obviously you can't use it for official identification. I just don't understand why this even came up to question.
Right.
Maybe people are thinking that that's how they look.
So, I mean, in fact, I've looked up what this recognition software does, and from like a scale of 1 to 100, I think, perhaps, but 55 is the benchmark. So if it's less than 55, then you automatically gets rejected.
That's so insulting. So the machine is telling you, you
Whether
don't
you're
even
similar.
look 50%
Exactly, yeah.
like this
like
picture.
Your 5 years, like yourself 3 years ago or something.
That's sad.
Well, what did you think about it, Xiong?
I mean, I think personally that ID card should have a photo that closely resembles reality. I mean, of course, there are other methods of identifying, such as fingerprints and other biometrics. But when in emergency, ID cards might be the only source of identification you could find on the scene. I mean, so employment experts also said that it is not appropriate to use AI profiles with excessive correction for public certificates and CVs or resumes for jobs. According to a survey of 383 companies conducted by Saramin in 2019, 4 out of 10 negatively evaluate profile photos that have been excessively corrected.
And you mentioned sense of reality, but these AI profile pictures could be the reality to some people. They might think that is really how they look.
It's reality.
No, but that's what I'm going for. I think the central issue to this controversy is why our generation loves using Photoshop or heavily relies on filters. And do you agree that a lot of people really like the prettier version of themselves to the point that they're using AI and using those profile pictures to be inserted on their national ID cards?
Sadly, I think yes. Some people, this is the case for some people. But I do think that there is another side of it where, AI has been developing with our nation, and we kind of consider it a form of entertainment where you can see your face in, I don't know, older. Nowadays, that's a trend. You get to see your face, what you would look like in 40 years. And you can also do different hair colors, different eye colors, and makeup styles. Just, with the drop of a hat, you can just do it like that without any effort. So that's kind of an entertaining way to see maybe in another multiverse how I would have looked like. But I think if you get really into it, that you lose sight of reality. That's when body dysmorphia comes in. I think in my mind I look like this, but reality is I look different. So I don't know. I think you should really try to stay in touch with what you look like in the mirror.
I mean, there's always issues with the internet as well. Sort of like not catfishing purposely, but there's always issues of people not showing who your true self is, especially even just like not just the things you need your own pictures. It might just be like chat rooms and things like that. People giving up a false image. That's always been a problem as well.
But why do you think our generation does that, though?
I mean, well, to be honest, like the Gen Zs are the first to grow up in an online world where the web and social media is ubiquitous. And as a result, many of today's young people spend an overwhelming time on the online space, with smartphones giving you access 24/7. Korea in particular, in my opinion, and what I've experienced for the past 20-something years, it seems to have an extended market for Photoshop and beauty apps due to its strenuous standards of beauty. And I personally gravely worry about this trend of Photoshops and filters, because I think it'll not only exacerbate, but exacerbate the unrealistic standards of beauty.
That is so true. And I think a lot of people do Photoshop. We were mentioning this right before. Some people Photoshop their prettiest version and they go to like the surgeons, plastic surgeons, and say, hey, please make my face look like this Photoshop version of me. Exactly. That's just how much a lot of Korean youngsters are using Photoshop. And why don't we now include a psychology expert to hear what she has to say about this issue? We'll include her in our talks right after this. We're going to be hearing from a psychology expert to find out why our generation seems to have such a high reliance on Photoshop and filters. Let's find out if there's a psychological reason for this by including Swechun Zibai in our talks. She's a PhD candidate in psychology at Princeton University. Welcome, Swechun.
Hi, all. Thanks for having me.
Hello. All right, we're going to go around the room and ask you a question each. My first question is, we're definitely seeing a lot more airbrushing, Photoshop, and use of filters among our generation. Why do you think this is the case? And could you explain the psychology behind relying on Photoshop and camera filters?
Of course. I totally agree with you on the observation that we see increasing use of Photoshopping and camera filtering. Among many different kinds of factors like self-expression among younger generations, I think one of the primary driving force is actually from the advancement of AI technology in both photoshopping techniques and also in social media platforms. For photoshopping is kind of obvious because the recent artificial intelligence is making all kinds of photo editing super easy and convenient to use. Sometimes I just give a comment and say, I want to look like this actress, and it just changes everything. Right. It's easy to use without requiring any professional skills. But I think another reason is coming from the social media platform, where whenever we post a photo, we get lots of likes and shares and hearts and views, counts of views. Those accounts can serve as a positive social signal that reinforce behavior that we have nowadays. So I think those kind of social media platform, the design of those recommender systems is creating another driving force for why we're using Photoshopping and photo sharing more and more.
Right. Yes. And before we go on to you, Xiao, is there a psychological concept behind that? Is there an explanation for why we're doing that?
Yeah, I think this is an active research area, but one psychological phenomenon that I think is really intriguing is called pluralistic ignorance. So the idea is that we are trying to edit ourselves to look like an ideal image, but the idea is that everyone is doing that. That meaning that no one actually looks like their social media posts. We are comparing ourselves to a collective illusion. Now that is the pluralistic ignorance, which is the constructed reality that we are having right now. But then what's psychologically interesting is that those are the kind of constructed social norm that is really hard, A, to realize that it's not real, and B, it's hard to change that social norm. And part of the reason is because sometimes we see people punish deviants, meaning that we punish people who do not confirm that social norm, who do not confirm a certain kind of outlook. And that just makes it even harder to change that whole ignorant connection.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I think when the society actually makes it a norm to have your photos edited, especially exacerbated, as you said, development of AI technology, as well as, the social construct around social media and things like that, that does seem to push for a collective idea that Photoshop and the editing of pictures is necessary. I mean, so from a psychology perspective, what are some concerns you have with millennials and Gen Zs heavily relying on camera filters or Photoshop?
Yeah, so one of the concerns we already discussed is about the resistance to break that social norm. And that might have negative consequences on individuals who deviate from that, conventional, beautiful outlook. Having lots like decrease in self-esteem and things like that. And there's another component I want to point out, which is about the feedback loop to AI system. So the idea is that for those artificial intelligence to empower new photoshopping techniques, they need lots of training data. And those training data comes from the way we present ourselves, from the images we have, from the labels we give them. Now, the problem is that when we have a very homogenized idea of what's beautiful, that means the training data is not diverse. A lack of diversity in training data is going to lead to more biased algorithms and more biased predictions in the future. So I think that is another part which worth more attention.
So I have the last question for you. So we've been talking about people deviating from the social norm of, posting Photoshop versions of ourselves onto social media. So it's not completely inevitable. So are there any words of advice that you'd like to give to the younger generation that has to live through this, has to navigate how to use and when not to use Photoshop and filters?
Yeah. I do think that's a very challenging question. If I know how to change that social norm, I think that would be a scientific breakthrough. Although I do think first of realizing that it might be a constructed illusion, I think that is the first step. And then second of all, I think this is the way I would think about the individuals in the society, which is that we are not only the users of those AI technologies, we can be the creators, we can be the influencers of those photoshopping skills, right? So the idea is that it's really up to us in terms of decide what kind of AI technology we want in the future. Do we want photoshopping to give us similar recommendations in the future, or do we want AI to give us more diversified and interesting ideas, interesting different kinds of outlooks in the future? And that is going to change later.
It's really up to us then.
Exactly.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to hear from you today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks so much. My pleasure to be here.
All right, and before we continue our talks, we're also going to hear what our global viewers had to say on today's topic. Take a look at the screen to find out what 3 of them had to say. Shay Luna Midnight said, I choose to use filters for good and not for evil. I don't really Photoshop, but I find natural light universally flattering on most people. Ashika said, I do not use Photoshop, but I do use filters sometimes. I think using all these technologies, I just get to see a different or better version of myself and something different from what's captured in a mirror. A better look without really using any makeup products. Nats that said, we live in an age of the inauthentic. To stay virtuous in these dark times is to remain true to nature and yourself. Do not seek admiration from others. There's no value in it. To live an authentic life is to live a meaningful life. Once again, thank you to our viewers who shared their insights. Now I would like to wrap up our discussion with what Sue Chun-ji actually told us. She mentioned a lot of interesting things. I mean, what really fascinated me was if you're living in a homogenous society, it's really hard for you to have diverse beauty standards.
That's exactly, that was my takeaway.
Would you like to elaborate?
I mean, it makes sense because anything, even like ChatGPT, any machine learning models, AI, artificial intelligence models, learn from the database, right? So if there's a distinct pattern, there are concerns with the ChatGPT being English majority sources that ignores anything that's in foreign languages, for example. It's going to be the same for these beauty apps. For example, actually, one of my friends from the UK, but he's of Arabic origin, North African. And so he tried the snow application, and it turned him into a super Korean-looking guy. He was shocked, actually, to sort of, you know, actually absolutely destroyed any standout features of his face.
Exactly.
And that is the case we're talking about, exactly what Sue Chun-ji was talking about, the standards of beauty becoming biased depending on what kind of database the application uses. So I think that raises quite a bit of concern using these AI profiles.
Especially if we want to see diverse and more creative use of AI, we shouldn't be doing that, right?
Definitely.
And what about you, Nell? What was the takeaway you got?
You know, it's funny he mentioned the whole non-Korean using snow, and the filter makes somebody looks really Korean. I've had the same experience on a different app, but with a more Western makeup look, and it made me look not Korean, not Western, I don't know what it is. It looked scary. So the standard that we're putting on everybody, it shouldn't be the same for everyone. Everyone looks different, everyone has good features and, you know, features that are not conventionally beautiful. But I think really coming to terms with what we look like individually, and we should celebrate that diversity, right? And I think being in touch with reality of what we look like in the mirror, as well as having fun with the AI filters is so key, the balance of that.
And as Sue Chun-ji mentioned, it's an illusion. It is. It's an illusion.
Like a collective, well, it's rude to say idiocracy, but it's more of a collective action. It makes sense because everybody else is doing it. If you're the only one doing it, you might get made fun of or criticized for the, you know, what kind of pictures you take. But everybody's hiding behind their phones and online spaces. They feel comfortable to only post their pictures. You know, we have some influencers that are AI generated. Completely inexisting person who creates profit and things like that, which is quite alarming.
Right, and I think the biggest thing we can learn from today is that it is an illusion, so we should wake up from it.
But you know, if you want to use it.
But yeah, then again,
understand that it is illusion, but enjoy it and be able to control it. You
Love yourself.
Love yourself.
Love yourself.
Use it in moderation. All right, and we'll be here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang.
My pleasure.
And Nell-sung.
No problem.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.
하나, 둘, 셋.
Hey, Mr. Cupid, who's mine? Make sure you listen to what I say. I may be stupid or quite naive.
끝없이 쏟아지는 포터